Hi everybody, my name is Liam Johnston from Kerwin's Game Store and KGSOnline.com, and today we'll be opening a box of the brand new Magic the Gathering expansion, Ixalan. So, let's get ready. Here is the box. Ixalan, Vraska, Dinosaurs, green box. Let's see if we can open it up. Wow, this is really hard to open up. I did not expect this to be this hard to open. Well, while I'm opening it, I'm going to point out that if you notice the Planeswalker symbol on the front of the box, you'll see how that has the 25 right there on it. That is because this year, well, I guess actually next year will be the 25th anniversary of Magic the Gathering. I suppose that's why we'll be having a return to Dominaria this spring. But that is some time from now, so we'll start off with the current set, Ixalan. Look at this beautiful packaging. We have some of the nice card artwork from the set on the packs. And let's get started. So this set is great. It's a really tribal set. There's a lot of dinosaurs, pirates, merfolk like Tishana's Wayfinder, and then there's also some vampires. You see this card buffs your vampires. Okay, so our rare from the set is the Death Gorge Scavenger, which is pretty cool. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can exile a card from a graveyard, and you can either gain some life or buff it up for the turn. It's only until end of turn, not a counter, so I don't think you should be doing that the same turn it comes in unless you can give it haste somehow. But still, pretty powerful dinosaur, especially when you're hating against some sort of graveyard strategy, like if your opponent has some sort of like, Scrap Heap Scrounger or Dread Wanderer type cards. In this pack, we can see some other cool ones. We've got a reprint of Favorable Winds, which is a pretty sweet enchantment. It's for blue. It gives all of your creatures with flying +1/+1. Usually that's the kind of ability you'd get from white, from like an Honor of the Pure or Glorious Anthem type card, but you get it in blue, and there's some pretty cool blue flying tokens around in Standard, so that could be useful. Sky Terror is also pretty cool. He's a dinosaur, a little hard to cast at a red and a white, but with flying and menace, it's going to be pretty hard to block him anytime soon. And our rare in this pack is Arcane Adaptation. Basically, there's a whole lot of text on this card, but basically what it does is that it makes every creature in your deck into whatever type you want them to be. So in Standard, maybe you want them all to be zombies or vampires or dinosaurs. Maybe in Commander, you need all of your creatures to be slivers or allies. There's some combos you can pull off with that one. So that's sort of like the card Conspiracy, the card Xenograph from New Phyrexia. Some similar ones in the past, but this is as far as I know, the first one that's been as cheap as this one is at only 3 mana. We also have in this pack, this is a checklist card. It's got, double-faced cards are back in this set, and this is what you can use in your deck instead of the double-faced card. Because obviously, they don't have normal Magic the Gathering card backs. They will have another card on the back instead. And this card you can put into the deck to show which one it's supposed to be. Alright, in the next pack, our rare is Sanguine Sacrament. Sort of an interesting card. Anything that has the words double or twice or 2 times on it, you can often count on being good in some sort of format. On the other hand, life cards that only gain life or change players' life totals like this card does tend not to be so great in some formats. So I don't know. It's hard for me to see it in Standard or Modern or anything like that, but gaining double X life in like an Oloro Ageless Ascetic Commander deck, that could actually be something. Oh, and we actually have some pretty cool uncommons too. The Sentinel Totem. It's a 1-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 1, and then you can tap it and exile it to exile all cards from graveyards. Now, maybe it's not quite as powerful as the Relic of Progenitus in that it doesn't get you a card back, but it is more mana efficient because you only have to spend the mana the first time around. And you do scry 1, so that's you know, some people think that scrying 1 is somewhere between drawing a third of a card and drawing a half a card, something like that in terms of value. And then the Charging Monstrosaur. I don't know if this is going to be something in Constructed, but in Draft I can hardly imagine a 5 mana 5/5 trample haste. I mean, that's like that's Reality Smasher stats, right? And that card sees some pretty significant play even in Modern. So this guy, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if he's going to show up in Constructed, but I can see him ending some games pretty quickly in Draft, or especially in Sealed. All right, in our next pack, we've got a Vampire token. Now, normally I'm not going to talk too much about the tokens. Well, that's probably not true. I probably will talk about the tokens. But because it's important to note the tokens that the set makes. This set happens to make 1/1 life-linking vampires is one of the tokens that this set creates, as well as the treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So we'll see those showing up on tons of cards in the future throughout the box. We've got some interesting reprints actually in this pack. For example, Cobbled Wings. That's some nice artwork on this older reprinted card. The original card, Cobbled Wings, was from, I think it was from the original Innistrad, where it was had a sort of storm cloud thing, and this is sort of you can see the difference in tone between the two sets. This one's much happier than Innistrad was. As well as the other reprint I had in this pack. Where'd it go? Spell Pierce, one of my favorite cards. And are they ever going to print this card without a Merfolk on it? I don't know. But I don't want them to, because this card's great in blue decks. Not so great in non-blue decks, but great in blue decks. Sideboard, sometimes main deck, it can be playable. It's not, obviously it's more mana efficient than Negate, but not quite as powerful in that, like, it doesn't do as much once the game progresses. But in larger formats like Modern and Legacy, paying 2 can often be prohibitively expensive. Even in Standard, that can be the case. So you can hit their early Planeswalker or Fumigate or whatever they were hoping to do to sort of stabilize against you if you're playing an aggressive blue deck, like the Merfolk that are in this set. Speaking of powerful blue cards that are non-creature spells, River's Rebuke returns all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. That can be a lot of stuff. It is a sorcery, and it is 6 mana, so it better oftentimes just say you win the game to be playable in a lot of formats. This doesn't necessarily say that, but it is pretty powerful, and if you can land it against an opponent who maybe has a lot of tokens out, obviously if tokens would leave the battlefield, they just cease to exist instead. So that could be one option. It does hit clues and treasures, not that clues will be relevant in Standard for much longer. But the treasures will, and since it returns all non-lands to their owner's hand, of note, that means it actually doesn't hit any of the transform cards. That is the double-faced cards in this set once they've transformed, since they all transform into lands. The backside of all of them is a land card on the other side. This next pack has one of the legendary creatures from the set, Captain Lannery Storm. She's pretty cool. She's one of the more interesting cards in the set, especially since she's a legendary creature. She's a pirate, and she has 3 abilities. One of those abilities is haste. So she's 3 mana, 2/2. Haste. Whenever Captain Lannery Storm attacks, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And she has, whenever you sacrifice a treasure, Captain Lannery Storm gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So right on turn 3, she can attack potentially as a 3/2 attacker, right? You play her down on turn 3, go to attacks, declare her as your attacker, create a treasure token immediately, and put that token into play. And you can immediately sacrifice it for the mana. Even if you don't have anything to spend it on, you can sacrifice it if you just want to get in for the extra damage. Usually that's not going to be worth it on that early. But if you've got like a Magma Spray or a Shock in hand that you can spend that mana on, it could be worth it, right? And if you don't spend that mana, then you could bring Glory the next turn, right? She ramps you, in mono red, ramps you directly into a turn 4 Glory Bringer just by attacking on turn 3. So that, which is interesting because the treasures are great with the pirates, and the pirates make the treasures because the pirates are in 3 different colors, none of which are green. So mana fixing is going to be pretty important for anyone who wants to build a sort of pirate deck. Our next pack, we've got our first double-faced card of the box. Primal Amulet. Primal Amulet is one of the coolest cards in the set, I think. It's got, so it's a 4-mana artifact. And it says, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So, like, right away, first ability, its mana cost plus its first ability right away puts it in the sort of like Jace's Sanctum type of area. You know, that was a similar card. There was a 4-mana enchantments instead of an artifact that also reduced your instant sorcery spells by 1. But that one let you scry. Now, let's see what this one does. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Primal Amulet. Then, if there are 4 or more charge counters on Primal Amulet, you may transform it. Well, remove them and transform it. So what does that do? Well, you can play this down on turn 4, maybe turn 3 if you're ramping, but turn 4 or so. Then, once you've cast 4 instant or sorcery spells, which are all reduced by 1, you flip it over and it becomes Primal Wellspring, and it has the reminder text that transforms from Primal Amulet. Not sure why that's on the card, but it has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. When this mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may target it. You may copy it and choose new targets for the copy. So, what would you pay to have this land in play? A lot. I mean, that is a powerful land. It doesn't have to be used on instant or sorcery. Well, first of all, it produces mana of any color. So it's already base, City of Brass, no pain. Then, if you use it to cast even, a lightning bolt, let's say, in modern, or a shock in standard, it becomes exponentially more powerful. Right, it doubles the effectiveness of all of your cards, but because it causes it causes you to save cards by doubling all your cards. So it turns a shock into 2 shocks. It saves you mana and saves you cards. So if you need to take down a 4/4 creature with shock, you don't have to spend 2 shocks out of your hand. You only have to spend the 1. So this is pretty nuts as a land. The question is just going to be, how is it, in terms of getting it flipped, right? How hard is that going to be? But I got to say, the artwork on both sides is gorgeous, and the new border for the lands on the other side is certainly something to, certainly different from anything we've seen before, except that it's got the land symbol in the top left-hand corner of the card that, I think the last time we actually saw that on a card was on Future Shifted Lands from Future Sight. So that's pretty interesting. Like Grove of the Burnwillows. This next pack, we've got a pretty interesting card. It's one of the new dinosaur cards. It's called Kinjali's Sunwing. It's a dinosaur. It's a 3-mana, 2/3 flyer with creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So we've been seeing a lot more of this sort of ability lately. The causing permanents to enter the battlefield tapped, I think it was originally from Kismet, an enchantment from Legends. And then it's been on certain things over the years. In Standard right now, as of right before Ixalan, there's already Authority of the Consuls. the enchantment. There's also Thalia, the Heretic Cathar, from Eldritch Moon, which have similar effects. This card is also similar to the Imposing Sovereign from M14. Which, if you compare it to that, paying an additional colorless mana, or generic, I guess I should say, for an additional 2 toughness and flying seems like a pretty good deal. It shuts off your opponent's haste, prevents your so it's both an aggressive ability and a defensive ability, because as I just said, it shuts off your opponent's haste, right? So if your opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped, that means it doesn't matter that Bomat Courier and Earthshaker Kenra and Hazoret the Fervent all have haste, because they're tapped. Tapped creatures can't attack. So, obviously. But it also means that you can be more aggressive, because when your opponent plays creatures that, they were hoping to be able to block with, they instead can't block with them, because tapped creatures can't block either. So that it's certainly something to look at. It might be a sideboard card against mono red decks that are bringing in, like I mentioned, Bomat Courier, Earthshaker Kenra, On-Crop Crasher, Captain Lannery Storm, Hazoret the Fervent, cards like that can really punish you harshly out of the gate if you don't have some sort of fast defense or way to stop them. And having them enter the battlefield tapped and thus not be able to attack you with haste can be a fairly effective way of shutting that down, especially once they can attack, and it then becomes a powerful blocker that Earthshaker Kenra, for example, can't get through without help. All right, this next pack is really sweet. We opened one of the coolest cards in the set. We got Huatli, Warrior Poet. She's a Planeswalker for 3 generic, 1 red, and 1 white. Legendary Planeswalker, Huatli. +2, you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. 0, create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample. It's another one of the tokens that the set creates. Or that I suppose you have the ability to create in this set. And lastly, -X, Huatli Warrior Poet deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Creatures dealt damage this way can't block this turn. So, a few things about this card. This is the first Planeswalker we've seen in this box. As you can see, she says Legendary Planeswalker. This has caused a lot of confusion lately, so let's clear it up real quickly. All Planeswalkers are legendary from now on. All Planeswalkers from the past are errated to be legendary cards. Obvious question, or not obvious questions, but frequently asked questions. Can this Planeswalker be my commander? The answer is no. Well, if you're asking then, but what about the Planeswalkers from Commander 2013 that say they can be your commander, or the Planeswalkers from Magic Origins? In the case of the Magic Origins Planeswalkers, remember, the front face of the card is a legendary creature, so it can still be your commander because of that. And the Planeswalkers from Commander 2014, can be your commander because the card itself says it can be your commander. Huatli, Warrior Poet, cannot be your commander because your commander must be a legendary creature. But she does work very interestingly now with anything in the past that could work with legendary cards. For example, Captain Sisay from Invasion is a pretty popular commander in green and white with tap, search your library for a legendary card and put that card into your hand and reveal it to all players, shuffle your deck, etc. You can now find any Planeswalker with that, including Huatli Warrior Poet. But anyway, so back to the card itself. Her +2 ability is interesting. You can gain some life. If you're getting beat down by, let's say there's still a zombies deck, right? Let's say there's still a Hazoret the Fervent deck. Probably there will still be some sort of beat down deck, something attacking you with aggressive, fast creatures coming right out the gate. Boom, boom, boom. You might, if you've got, if you're playing the big creature game, you could really gain a lot of life off of that. But her zero ability is also pretty interesting because you can just start every turn, put out a 3/3 with trample. Sort of the same, similar to the way the Nissa Voice of Zendikar could create 0/1 plant tokens, or the way Gideon Ally of Zendikar can, for 0 loyalty, create 2/2 Knight Ally tokens. She's similar to those cards, a little higher up on the curve at 5, but Planeswalker that creates tokens quickly and easily the way Huatli does, and they're sizable tokens. They're some of the biggest tokens we've seen from a Planeswalker. It's an impressive ability, and at -X, I mean, so there are some games when she will be act very similar to a sorcery that says 5 mana, 3 creatures can't block this turn, you win the game. If you have enough power to end the game just by preventing blockers, sometimes she just does that. So she's pretty versatile. She can stabilize you by creating a 3/3 creature to block with. She can put you out of range of burn. Cards like Ramunap Ruins and Shock and Lightning Strike is back in this set by gaining you some life off your larger creatures. And she can potentially help put the game away by preventing blockers with her -X ability. So, really cool card, really cool character in the stories. Let's see if this Planeswalker figures out that she's a Planeswalker. So, our next pack has a really interesting card, actually. It's called Repeating Barrage. Repeating Barrage deals 3 damage to target creature or player. It also has Raid. 3 red, return Repeating Barrage from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you attacked with a creature this turn. So, there is a lot going on this card. So, it's a 3 mana lightning bolt at sorcery speed. Okay. That by itself is pretty bad, but the ability to return it from your graveyard to your hand, even at 5 mana, which is admittedly a hefty price, is, so let's talk about the downside of this card. The downside of this card is that it asks you to use a lot of mana on it. 3 mana for 3 damage is quite a bit. But you do get the option to buy it back, and all you have to do is attack with creatures. So it has the potential actually to be an early burn spell, either to your opponent's life points directly or to one of his or her creatures to help get blockers out of the way or take care of a threat that you might need getting rid of. And then later on in the game, if you are beating down with a Hazoret, let's say, and if you're in a situation we could easily see in Standard, that could easily be a common situation, is you're attacking with Hazoret the Fervent. You've got very few cards in hand, and they are blocking with, they're just keep constantly blocking your Hazoret with 1/1 life-linking vampires, 1/1 hexproof merfolk, some sort of 3/3 dinosaurs with trample, whatever repeatable common token that they're creating. Let's say they've got Adanto the First 4 and they've transformed it, and now the two of you are just hell-bent for the rest of the game. Neither of you're just top-decking the top of your deck. That's redundant. You're just drawing the top of your deck and seeing what you can do, but the situation, and it seems like it could be a common situation in Standard, is swing with Hazoret, get blocked by a token. Swing with Hazoret, get blocked by a token. Well, this card can help put away a game like that, because not only can you pitch it to Hazoret to deal 2 directly to their face with little downside, except that you probably should just cast it. All you have to do is swing with the Hazoret and bring it back, right? Even if you, for some reason, can't attack, you can, well, if you can't attack, you can't get it back, can you? Well, anyway, it's a repeatable effect, and repeatable damage over and over and over and over again, even at a cost like 8 mana, can be quite effective and quite powerful over a longer game. Okay, Okay, so our next rare is a pirate card called Daring Saboteur. Daring Saboteur has she's got two abilities. For 3 mana, Daring Saboteur can't be blocked this turn. And whenever Daring Saboteur deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So, she's a looter. But she's a 2-power looter. But she's also a pirate. But she's 2 mana. So she's 2 mana, 2-1. Let's start there. 2 mana, 2-1 with 2 abilities. One is makes her unblockable, and the other one makes her a looter for the turn. So, on the one hand, she's like a really, really mana-hungry version of Looter Ilkor from Future Sight. On the other hand, she's got 2 power. Looter Ilkor only had 1 power. And was basically unblockable with Shadow, whereas this card she can just become completely unblockable by paying 3 mana. So we'll see if there's a discard theme in Pirates, or a lot of Pirates are in blue, like Daring Saboteur. So it could be that there are a lot of things you want to be discarding. I don't know. Maybe this is crazy to think that her ability to loot could be triggering a Drake Haven, or Faith of the Devoted, or something like that from Amonkhet. You could be discarding creature cards with Embalm or Eternalize. Or just digging through your deck. I mean, looting is always good. You basically always want to do it in a game of Magic. So, if the Pirate Tribal Synergy is strong enough, she could really be a powerful card. And if not, she's still powerful on her own. It just depends on if she can find a home. I would say she probably can, but we'll find out. Now, in this next pack, we've got one of the most talked about cards in this set. And it's from probably the most talked about creature tribe in the set. We opened the Carnage Tyrant. Carnage Tyrant is a 6 mana, 4 colorless, 2 green, 7/6 dinosaur. It can't be countered. It has trample, and it has hexproof. This thing is huge. This thing is basically unstoppable. All right, I find it very hard to see how a blue deck can beat this thing. He can't be countered. You can't disallow him. You can't void shatter him. You can't cancel him. He's got hexproof, so you can't make him walk the plank. You can't Doomblade him if that was around. You can't cast Murder. Your opponent plays this, he attacks with it. You can't block it with Torrential Gearhulk unless you can make the Gearhulk bigger. Right? Gearhulk's only a 5/6. It gets run over, you lose the Gearhulk, and you still take damage on top of it. Only 1 damage, granted, but I mean, this thing is huge. At 6/6, if he was a 6/6 instead of a 7/6, it would still be crazy. And this guy is even bigger than that at 7/6. Basically, nothing can block it profitably. It is going to be hard to get this thing off the board. If this thing had 5 toughness, it would still be good. It'd still be crazy, but Hour of Devastation could kill it. Hour of Devastation, the named card from the last set, cannot kill this thing. It doesn't deal enough damage. Okay, there's like, there's one card in Standard maybe that can kill this thing is Fumigate. This guy is going to be a major player, both in dinosaur decks that take advantage of his creature type, and decks that just ramp into him by other means, like Servant of the Conduit and Spring to Mind. So watch out for this guy. He's going to be huge in Standard, as well as possibly some other formats. Maybe not Modern, but Commander. I'm sure he'll be played quite a bit by some green mages who are sick of having their creatures countered or killed by the blue and black mages among us. Speaking of black mages, our next card is actually a pirate creature from the newest set. It's also an orc, which is a creature type we haven't seen in a little while. There were some in Tarkir block, but not much since then. So he's a 3-mana 3/2, the Ruin Raider. At the beginning of your end step, reveal the top card of your library. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost, and then put it into your hand. But you only do that if you attacked with a creature this turn. So he's like a bigger, more aggressive version of Dark Confidant from the original Ravnica set, which could fit in with your pirates. A lot of your pirates want to be attacking, like the Daring Saboteur attacks to let you loot, or Kari Zev from Ether Revolt is also pirate attacks and makes a token. Captain Lannery Storm attacks and makes a treasure token. So it could be an interesting way to gain card advantage. We've seen Dark Confidant played really heavily in Modern, especially in decks that also contain cards like Lightning Bolt that can deal more damage than they are mana cost. So this could be the top end of a really aggressive deck, or, well, that's probably where he's going to be in Standard for the time being. But we'll see how he does. He is a pirate, so I don't know if that will be the main reason we play him, but it could be that the tribal synergy is just strong enough with the pirates that we want him for the creature type, and then his additional abilities are just cake on top of that. And that's, I mean, if you draw one card, it's pretty good. So the rare in our next pack is the Daring Saboteur again, so we've already talked about her. But so instead I want to talk about the Vicious Conquistador. Pulse Tracker is back again, but this time he's a soldier. And has an additional toughness, which is probably more relevant for Standard than just the soldier tribal aspect, which I don't think there's any in Standard right now. This guy looks like he'll be one of the premier 1-drops in any sort of black-white vampire tribal deck, the other being the Legion's Landing card. Whenever Vicious Conquistador attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. So it's like he has 2 power, except, you know, he doesn't deal 2 damage to opposing creatures when he's in combat with them. So it's not really 2 power, but he can effectively swing for 2 on turn 2. So that's pretty potent, especially if you have anything to back him up with. And remember, there are other vampires in Standard that are in some of the older sets, especially Ether Revolt has some pretty good vampires in it. So our next pack has Drowned Catacomb. We have seen this card printed how many times now? M10, M11, M12, and M13. Yeah, 4 right in a row, core sets. And it's always been pretty powerful, or at least, right up there. So all 5 of them are back. Glacial Fortress, Drowned Catacomb, Dragon Skull Summit, Rootbound Crag, and Sunpetal Grove, the 5 ally-colored check lands, as they are called, are back. Drowned Catacomb enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island or a swamp. The other 4 act exactly the same way, checking for their 2 respective land types, without, of course, themselves being that land type. Last time we saw things in Standard, this set, this cycle of cards in Standard, basically the entire Standard format came to rotate around the interaction between the check lands, back then we had all 10, and the shock lands from Return to Round Again. We had all 10 of those as well. The interaction between the 2 cycles, of course, being that any shock land makes a check land that shares one of the 2 types come in untapped. So you could Hallowed Fountain, which is Plains Island, turn 1, and then after that, any of your blue or white check lands were all turned on and could come into play untapped. We've got something similar going on right now because we've got, except just half of it. So we've got the 5 ally-colored check lands here in Ixalan, and the 5 ally-colored cycling lands from Amonkhet. They interact basically exactly the same way as the Shocklands interacted with this cycle, except that the cyclers always come into play tapped. And there's only 5 of each instead of 10 of each. So it could make ally-colored decks more powerful, especially mana fixing wise, than the enemy colored decks in standard. So that's definitely something to look out for upcoming. Another reprint in this set is Lightning Strike. We last saw this card in Theros when everyone was saying, wow, why is this card called Lightning Strike? And they didn't just reprint Searing Spear. But this card is back. It's an uncommon this time for draft reasons and for sealed reasons. This will probably be one of the most important removal spells in Standard, because it can also go directly to your opponent's life points. It's Lightning Bolt for 1 more damage, or 1 more mana. Jeez, that would be a card. Lightning Bolt for 1 more mana. Lightning Bolt, too good for Standard, literally. So just keep an eye on Lightning Strike. We've got another Mythic. We've got Wakening Sun's Avatar, another dinosaur. This one is a 7/7. It's even bigger than the Carnage Tyrant. It costs 2 more mana. Excuse me. 5 white. It's a dinosaur. It's also an avatar. And when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, you can destroy all non-dinosaur creatures. He's big. This guy is really big, even for a dinosaur. And can really put the game away if you're playing the dinosaur deck, especially if you're pumping out tokens with cards like Watley, the Regisaur Alpha, which creates a 3/3 dinosaur token. Same 3/3 green dinosaur token with trample that Watley creates. The Regisaur Alpha creates when it enters the battlefield. So this could be the top end of a dinosaur deck that's really good at ramping out cards. Or it could be the only creature in a white control deck. We'll see. Either way, it's powerful. The only question is, how do you get to 5 white? Because that is a lot of mana. A lot of mana. Our next pack, we have, our rare is Goring Ceratops, another expensive dinosaur. 5 white. It's a white less. It's a 3/3 with double strike, and whenever Goring Ceratops attacks, other creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. Wow. That is one heck of an ability. Whenever this creature attacks, your creatures gain double strike, and it has double strike. So, I mean, I can't imagine if you could give this thing haste and swing in with a bunch of tokens or dinosaurs. I mean, the game ends pretty quickly, right? So that's definitely a bomb and limited if you can. It seems like, you can get to 7 mana in this set. I actually want to talk about the foil in this pack. We got a Legion Conquistador. It's a 3 mana 2/2, and it's a white creature. It's a vampire soldier, and its ability basically says when it enters the battlefield, you can search your deck for all your other copies of Legion Conquistador. A lot of people have been comparing this card to Squadron Hawk, which is an interesting comparison. Obviously, Squadron Hawk has basically the same ability as this card, except now we don't have, cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor to combo it with. So it could be good. We'll see if there's any profitable, good reason to be discarding cards, particularly if there's a good way to discard, a good reason to be discarding vampires / creatures / soldiers. Maybe it's just a good way to get cards in your hand to pitch to a card like Hazaret the Fervent or Key to the City from Kaladesh. There's a lot of reasons why having the additional cards in your hand just to discard could be useful. Our next pack has a card called Unclaimed Territory. So the rules text on this card might read familiar to some of us. It says, as Unclaimed Territory enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. And it has tap, add colorless to your mana pool. And then it has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. You spend this mana only to cast creature spells of the chosen type. It's like they left something off. Did they forget some text? Did they forget something about that spell can't be countered? Well, yeah. So this is pretty similar to Cavern of Souls from Avacyn Restored, except the Cavern of Souls said that the creature spell couldn't be countered. With Unclaimed Territory, the spell can still be countered. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. This is going to be great in Standard. Dinosaur decks look like they're going to be Naya colors, so 3 colors. They're going to want probably a playset of this thing to be able to cast their dinosaurs with all those colored mana symbols. Like I mentioned earlier, pirates are also in 3 colors, none of which are green. So they're going to need ways to fix their mana. And the pirates don't seem to have little non-pirate creatures to help them out the way dinosaurs need to. So the pirates probably need this even more. It's going to be great in white-black vampire decks, blue-green merfolk decks, any other tribal decks that people are looking at. Could be good in a zombie deck if you still want to do that. So it's definitely a card to look at if you want to use it in Commander. I suspect Commander players will be naming Slivers with this card quite often, maybe even Scarecrow for for cards like Reaper King, or Vampire in Edgar Markov decks, or whatever. If you're building a tribal Commander deck, probably this is a pretty easy add. It's only an uncommon. It taps for any color you need, no matter what color that happens to be, in your 5-color ally deck or your 2-color goblin deck. So that's great. Great card. Next one is, all right, we also got in this pack Otepec Huntmaster. Now this card is kind of crazy. It says dinosaur spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and it has tap, target dinosaur gains haste until end of turn. Okay, so I have 1 word to say about this card. Wow. So, all right, so it's 2 mana for a 1/2. Let me say something about this card. This card lets you attack with your dinosaurs 2 turns early. All right, now that might sound crazy, but normally if you have a 4-costed dinosaur, right, that dinosaur can't attack until turn 5, right? Land, dinosaur, wait a turn, then attack, right? This reduces the cost of the dinosaur and gives it haste. That means if you play this on turn 2, assuming your mana and your colors all work out, if you play this on turn 2, you can play a 4-mana dinosaur on turn 3 and attack with it. So it's almost like it's ramping you by 2, right? You still need the other land to be able to cast it. Like, let's say you have a Ripjaw Raptor, which is double green. You need to find the red for this and find the double green for the Ripjaw Raptor. But you can attack with it on turn 3 as a 4/5 with haste, right? So this is... if there's a dinosaur deck, I think it'll be because of this card. This will be a very important card for people who are trying to cast these, not just 4-drop, but 6 and 7 and 8-drop dinosaurs. This card is pretty nuts. So Verdant Sun's Avatar is another dinosaur, another avatar. This one's 7 mana. It's green. It says, whenever Verdant Sun's Avatar, another creature, enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. Well, pretty good. I don't have too much to say about this card, other than, like, if you're playing a Trostani Selesnya's Voice commander deck that does a lot with the life gain, you can sort of double up on the life gain, right? Because Trostani has the same ability. You can put a lot of big toughness creatures into your deck. This could be good in a Doran the Siege Tower type, Tree Foe, Defender, Toughness deck. That's probably where this thing's going to have a lot of home, is in these sorts of life gain green commander decks. So, it's not that it's a bad card. I just don't have too much to say about it. It's cool, though. Speaking of gaining life, Vraska's Contempt. 4 mana, black, instant that exiles target creature or planeswalker. All right, and you gain 2 life. All right, so let's pretend for a second that this was destroy, because the exile... actually, let's not. This card's crazy. This card's only 1 mana more than Hero's Downfall, and it exiles, and you gain 2 life. Right? You compare this card to Anguished Unmaking, right? Anguished Unmaking, sure, it's gold. Sure, it's 3 mana, right? But Anguished Unmaking, how often was Anguished Unmaking hitting a non-land permanent that's not a creature or a planeswalker? Basically never, right? For only 1 more converted mana cost, the difference in life total, your difference in life total after casting this versus casting Anguished Unmaking is 5 higher, right? Anguished Unmaking hits you for 3. This gains you 2, right? Anguished Unmaking gives your opponent a free card, assuming that card is a 0 mana Lava Spike, right? If that's one way of putting it, right? This gets rid of not anything you want. It's not going to get rid of a birthing pod or whatever, but it gets rid of any planeswalker, any creature. It doesn't say non-black. It doesn't have any rider like that. So definitely a good card. Definitely going to see some play. And it's got the sweet Planeswalker watermark. That means it's the Story Spotlight card number 3. For the 3rd story for Ixalan. All right, the next card. Our next rare is Angrat's Marauders, which is pretty interesting. So it says, if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. 4/4, 7 mana. So right off the bat, gotta say, it's a Furnace of Wrath. A Furnace of Wrath that probably doesn't hurt you also because it's only a source you control. But it's a 7 mana 4/4. All right, I should come out and say I don't think, cards like this are typically not high-level tournament cards, but they're really cool, right? Any lightning bolt you have is doubled, 6 mana or 6 damage for 1 mana. Anything that doubles, right? It's a doubling card. There are traditionally lots of people love doubling cards, doubling season, Anointed Procession from Amonkhet, various other doubling cards, Parallel Lives from Innistrad, basically the same thing as Anointed Procession, but in green. It has double, it has twice, it's interesting. It's hard not to see a red mage casting this thing in Commander and saying, stop this right now, or I'm threatening to end the game. And that's what this card does, is threaten to end the game. The next card is called Waker of the Wilds, the next rare. Waker of the Wilds is a really interesting card. It's a 4 mana, 3/3 mono green merfolk. I don't know that there have been mono green merfolk before this set. If there are, you are going to let me know in the comments. Please do. I would like to know. But it's a mono green merfolk. It's 4 mana, 3/3. You pay X, green, to put X +1/+1 counters on one of your lands, and that land becomes a creature. It's 0/0 creature. Elemental. So no really any tribal synergies in Standard. Certainly it's interesting. Of note, you cannot target your opponent's land. Also of note, if you pay GG for the ability and X is 0, your land will not get any +1+. The ability will put 0 +1/+1 counters on your land. Your land will then become a 0/0 creature and die. So if your opponent somehow gets the ability to mind slaver you and gain control of your turn, they'll be able to green and turn all of your lands into 0/0 creatures. Well, I guess half of them. But yeah, so don't do that. X can be 0. but it probably shouldn't be. So that's just something to keep in mind with Waker of the Wilds. Also of note, they are still lands, which means that the converted mana cost is still 0, which means Fatal Push can kill them no matter how big they are. So that's something to think about for Standard. Bigger formats like Commander, where you can spare the land and where X can be 50. Maybe, the danger of getting Fatal Pushed isn't as large. So something to think about. Also seems like another card that seems like a bomb in draft or in sealed. So here's a card that with some text that looks pretty similar to cards we've seen in the past. It's Tocatli Honor Guard, and she's protecting that castle. She's a 1/3 human soldier for 2 mana, and it says creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. So first of all, in Standard, that will immediately basically shut off any Panharmonicon deck. It also shuts down a lot of the creatures in Standard. For example, a lot of the creatures in Amonkhet have, when its creature enters the battlefield, put some number of -1/-1 counters on creatures you control. If those are triggered abilities for those ones, she'll prevent that. Those abilities won't trigger, and you won't put counters on your own creatures. In larger formats, she also happens to be a Torpor Orb that you can collective company into. So that's something to consider. So in Modern, if you're playing an Abzan company deck, maybe you need to side her in. Now I know a lot of your cards are themselves going to have enters the battlefield abilities that you're not going to want to shut off. But if your opponent's trying to combo out with something, she seems like she is designed to stop Felidar Guardian decks, but those don't really exist anymore. So that's not much of a problem. The next card is, or the next rare, I should say, is a vampire. It's called Bishop of Rebirth. Let's take a look. It's 5 mana for a 3/4 vampire cleric. She's got vigilance, so that's good. She's good on the attack and then can stay back to block. But whenever she attacks, you can return a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's interesting. There's a lot of cards you might want to hit with that, especially in white and especially in vampires, to bring them back into play. Cards like the Vicious Conquistador, Gifted Aetherborn, Yahenni, Undying Partisan. Look through whatever your Magic the Gathering card database of choice is. Take a look for creature card, converted mana cost 3 or less. And even if you limit it to vampires, there's a lot of choices. Vampire, Nighthawk, not in Standard, but another option. So this set, given that black-white vampires is one of the key themes of this set, we're going to be seeing a lot of great cards for people who picked up the Edgar Markov Vampiric Bloodlust commander deck that came out recently. There's a lot of great cards for that, especially, so like the Bishop of Rebirth, but also this next card that we just opened, the Sanctum Seeker. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So, I got a ton to say about this card. This card is awesome. This card is a 4 mana, 3/4, that whenever one of your vampires attacks, your opponents lose a life and you gain life. So, first of all, dodges ton of the red removal in Standard. It dodges Lightning Strike, it dodges Abrade, it dodges obviously Shock and Magma Spray unless they double up on those. Basically, the only way red can kill it is with a cut, the top side of Cut to Ribbons, or with Hour of Devastation. Okay. Next, if you're dropping this on turn 4 in a dedicated black-white vampire tribal deck, you could literally lightning helix them to the face, hit them for 3, gain 3, just by playing this thing. It's like Hellrider from Dark Ascension, but trading in the haste on the Hellrider for gaining life and an additional toughness. This thing has the potential to be massive. If you play on if you've got a turn 1 vampire, turn 2 vampire, turn 3 vampire, right? Just with that alone, you're hitting them for 3 just from the attack, just from declaring the attack, hitting them for 3 and gaining 3. Let alone let alone the actual creature's power that could be causing damage, not to mention any lifelink that could be happening. If you would play Vicious Conquistador turn 1, turn 2, let's say we're just mono black. Let's say we're mono black. You could Vicious Conquistador turn 1, turn 2, swing, hit them for 2. One on Conquistador's ability, 1 for its power. Turn 2, the Gifted Aetherborn. That's 2 more on top of it. Turn 3, some vampire. I mean, this guy, his power, the sheer amount of damage you're dealing to your opponent and the sheer amount of life you could be gaining off this guy could be absolutely massive in a dedicated vampire strategy, especially if you're making, let alone if you're making tokens in your deck. I mean, that it could just add up to be huge. But I see we'll move on to one of the more talked about cards in this set. It's called Sorceress Spyglass. So, if anyone who familiar with Pithing Needle will recognize this card, except that Pithing Needle costs 1 mana, and this costs 2. Well, the difference is that this lets you look at your opponent's hand. So you look, as it enters the battlefield, you look at your opponent's hand, and then choose a card name, and activated abilities of cards with the chosen name can't be activated. I mean, I gotta say, wow. So the problem with Pithing Needle is that sometimes, especially game 1, you don't know what to say. Should I name, Arid Mesa, or should I name, Flooded Strand, let's say, or should I name Jace, Architect of Thought, right? Jace, Cunning Castaway, Huatli, Warrior Poet. What should I name? I don't know. This, you actually get to choose what you name, right? So, and one interesting thing is that sometimes they don't always have the card you want to name in hand, but game 1, if you know the types of cards, if this ends up being a main deckable card, then some of the decks, especially let's say in Modern, you might not know what your opponent's playing, but you can look at their hand. Even if they don't have the specific card whose ability you want to name, like say the Planeswalker, you can often come to a pretty good guess of what that card will be from the cards you actually do see. So if you see a lot of blue and black cards and not a lot of cards of other colors in, say, Modern, you could name, what's it called? Polluted Delta. Name Polluted Delta with Sorcerer's Spyglass and prevent them from searching for lands with their land. And since Delta and the other fetch lands don't actually have their own mana abilities, I mean, you could, if they can't get rid of this thing, you know how that works. All right, so this next card is called, the next rare anyway, is a double-faced card. It's called Vance's Blasting Cannons. This is one of the coolest cards in the set. I gotta say, it's so cool. So, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. If it's, exile the top card of your library, you may cast that card this turn. Of note, you cannot hit lands. Sorry. But you can hit anything else. So it's at the beginning of your upkeep. Then you draw your card. It's sort of like a person. If you can use the card that turn, and it's not a land, if you can use the card that turn, it's like you have your own Howling Mine. You get to play additional cards every turn, assuming you can play them. It's a similar ability to Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and various other cards that have come out, especially over the past couple years, that have similar abilities. So then it also says, but would that be worth it for 4 mana? I don't know. Because it has a second ability. Whenever you cast your third spell in a turn, you may transform Vance's Blasting Cannons. So what does Vance's Blasting Cannons become? It becomes... I forget what it's called. Spitfire Bastion, a legendary land. It's a legendary enchantment, a legendary land on the backside. All right, what are its abilities? Tap, add red to your mana pool. All right, and 2 red, tap, Spitfire Bastion deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Oh, it doesn't sacrifice itself. You would, for an ability that powerful, to be able to lightning bolt, you would think that the land would sacrifice itself the way cards like Ramunap Ruins do. Well, not itself, but you'd have to sacrifice something like with Ramunap Ruins to be able to deal 3 damage to a creature or a player. But with Spitfire Bastion, you don't have to sacrifice anything. All you have to do is spend 3 mana, right? Well, I guess 4 mana because it's a land, but, you didn't play it as a land. Wow. If you can flip this thing over, you could just prevent your opponent from playing creatures. You could just completely lock them out of the game, potentially. So, this card is really cool. It's one of the cooler double-faced cards in the set. The artwork is amazing, and once flipped, it can just absolutely take over a game. Our next rare is one of the cards that I was really thinking about when we were talking about that vampire from a couple packs ago. This guy's a legendary creature, vampire cleric, Maverin Fane Dusk Apostle, and says whenever 1 or more vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Now it says 1 or more. Does the other one have the 1 or more? I don't remember this. This sounds brand new. Whenever a vampire you control. No. So the combo basically is you play him on turn 3, right? And that means that you get an additional token off the attack you're making that turn on turn 3 from your 1-drop or your 2-drop. And you get an additional token from attacking with him / your 2-drop, 3-drop, he is your 3-drop, your 2-drop or 1-drop, or the token, non-token, on turn 4. And if you have the Sanctum Seeker out, then it just really, really piles up really quickly. Especially if you have the Vicious Conquistador out, he's attacking for 2 every turn. If you've got the Gifted Aetherborn out of Aether Revolt out, if your 1-drop instead of the Conquistador was the legendary white enchantment we'll hopefully see, then that's gaining you life. I mean, the 2 cards together can really create a formidable board presence for your opponent to have to deal with. And so vampires really, it's great that they're making all these sweet vampire cards for decks, especially for commander decks like Edgar Markov. But speaking of vampires, Ashes of the Abhorrent. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or activate abilities of cards from graveyards. Whenever a creature dies, you gain a life. It's got some flavor text about vampires. I'm not sure how this works against vampires in this set. They actually don't seem to do too much with the graveyard in this set, or with dying, but it seems like a pretty good sideboard card. It prevents people from using cards like that one red card we saw that can come back from your graveyard, and some other things that are pretty popular in Standard. But here's an interesting card. Wrath to Exile, as I like to call it. It's called Settle the Wreckage. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls, and for each creature, its controller gets to rampant growth. Basically, you path all attackers, just like Path to Exile, at 4 mana, instant, obviously. Super powerful. One of the only ways to kill Hazaret the Fervent in Standard. One of the only ways to get rid of Carnage Tyrant in Standard. I would imagine you will be getting hit by this thing quite a bit. And you can hit your own tokens with it, so that's something. That's always something to consider. Another one is Dreamcaller Siren, a pirate with flash, flying. It can only block creatures with flying, but when it enters the battlefield, if you control another pirate, tap up to 2 target creatures. Tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. Okay, so you can flash this. If you have all you need is another pirate, token or not, and you can flash this thing in mid-combat or before combat to prevent attackers, the way people used to do with Cryptic Command and cards like that. It's a really interesting card. It could really help make pirate decks good enough to compete against some of the other tribes, some of the other strategies, so we'll see what happens. This is one of the most interesting cards in the set, I gotta say. So, Growing Rights of Itlamek is a 3-mana legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, take a creature card from among them, put it into your hand, then at the end of your turn, if you have 4 or more creatures, transform it, and it transforms into literally Gaia's Cradle. Literally better than Gaia's Cradle. I mean, wow, it's powerful. It is super powerful. As long as you have a creature in the top 4 cards of your library, the front side is a 1-for-1, basically. You spend 3 mana to draw a creature. But if you can flip this thing, you can start producing an absolutely absurd amount of mana. People have been talking about it for Modern, for Elves in Modern, decks like that. Standard, maybe. The Merfolk decks in Standard might be able to take good use of it, or some other Commanders type strategies. It definitely gets you thinking, how am I going to get this thing flipped? What kind of use am I going to get out of it? So, it's really cool. Next one we've got is called Spell Swindle. It's Mana Drain for 5 mana. So 5 mana, you instant counter target spell, and then you get treasure tokens equal to that card's converted mana cost. If X is not 0, if it's an X spell, you get all that mana in treasures, so that's something to consider. If your opponent tries to do something like gain double X life, you can instead get double X, not double X, but you can get X treasure tokens. Traditionally, 5 mana counter spells that are not named Force of Will don't get played too much in constructed formats other than Commander. But this one certainly is powerful. Counterlash wasn't playable. That's from Dark Ascension. Counterlash wasn't playable at 6. We saw recently Confirmed Suspicions, another 5 that made you 3 clue tokens. So, but those didn't have the explosive impact of a mana drain like card like Spell Swindle is. So this one might actually see some play. We'll see. I mean, if you counter the opposing Torrential Gearhulk with this thing, you could just win the game on the spot. Another one. So here's really cool dinosaur. I like dinosaurs. This dinosaur is Rampaging Ferocidon, a 3-mana, 3/3 menace. Players can't gain life. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So, if there was some sort of infinite creature combo in Standard, like we just saw with the Felidar Guardian Saheeli Rai combo, this card would kill any opponent who tried to do that without gaining life. It's a 3-mana, 3/3. It has evasion in its menace ability. It just beats down. You can drop it on turn 2 with the Kinjali's Caller, card. 1-drop white creature that reduces your dinosaurs. Oh yeah, you can just play Boros dinosaurs if you want and just beat down. Really powerful card, potentially, I think. And just gets in for extra damage if you just need another 3-drop in red decks. Here's a card everyone's been talking about. Ripjaw Raptor I've mentioned this one a few times, particularly when dinosaurs have come up, because this is one of the cards I'm most excited about. 4 mana, 4/5 creature. It's a dinosaur. It has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, you draw a card. Now, of note, you do not draw a card for each damage. You only draw a card for each instance of damage. So if your opponent casts Shock on it, you draw 1 card. If your opponent then casts Lightning Strike on it, you draw another card, and it dies. You can ramp this thing out with various options in not just in green, but in ones that I've mentioned in both red and white. So you could play Naya dinosaurs to ramp it out. Mono green dinosaurs can ramp it out. Red white can ramp it out. Can't cast it because you need to be green, but you get the point. This thing is powerful. Drawing cards is awesome. It's one of the most powerful cards in the set. I mean, there's not much else to say about it. Beyond that, right? So I'm going for a while. Here's another dinosaur that's really interesting is the Raging Swordtooth. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the names of these cards. The Raging Swordtooth is a 5 mana, 5/5, so pretty big. 5 mana, 5/5 trample. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each other creature. Now, on the one hand, that includes your own. On the other hand, if all your creatures are dinosaurs with Enrage abilities, and they all get abilities that trigger whenever they're dealt damage, maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to play this thing and trigger your Ripjaw Raptor or your other dinosaurs that gain triggered abilities from getting damaged. Certainly interesting. Certainly something you could try. And it's one of the cycle that they've been doing for a few years now for limited of gold uncommons that kind of give you a signpost as to how to draft those colors. So that's one to keep an eye on. Another one here is Conqueror's Galleon. Vehicles are back. Back with a vengeance from Kaladesh. I gotta say, they're not as powerful this time around as they were in Kaladesh. Probably none of them are going to need to get banned, as in Kaladesh. But with this card, it's a 4 mana vehicle. Right? It's a 2/10 vehicle with crew 4. All right, and basically, when it attacks, you flip it after combat, and it flips into a land. And the land taps for colorless, okay? Where you can pay 2 to loot, 4 to draw a card, or 6 to draw a card from your graveyard back to your hand. It's been compared to a lot of things. It's a Jelm Tome, a Jam Day Tome, another thing, plus a Mana Rock, plus a million different things all in one. Typically, whenever you see 4 different activated abilities on the same permanent, that's a pretty strong card, whatever it is. But we'll see how easy it is to get this thing flipped into its land form from its Conqueror's Galleon form. See how it is to get flipped. You only need 4 power worth of creature. All it has to do is survive combat, and with 10 toughness, it probably can do that pretty easily. Remember, the creatures who crew can be summoning sick. You can do it the same turn they come into play. Okay, last pack of the box. We're almost done. Let's see what's in this. I like to smell the packs. They smell nice, don't they? All right, what is our last rare? Our last rare is the Dino Lord himself. Well, not exactly. The Regisaur Alpha. 5 mana, 4/4 dinosaur. Other dinosaurs you control have haste. When he enters the battlefield, you get a 3/3 dinosaur token with trample. That's great. He's one of the most straightforward dinosaur lords, granting them haste and creating a token. Even if he is the only dinosaur card in your deck, he's still cool because he's still a 5 mana 4/4 that creates a hasty 3/3 with trample. He can help you attack with Carnage Tyrant a turn early. He just makes all of your dinosaurs that much better. And he's got some really sweet artwork. I really love that. The dinosaurs in this set have feathers, like dinosaurs in real life apparently did. So that's the whole box. That is the first box of the brand new set, Ixalan. There are some sweet cards in this set for Standard, Modern, Commander, and drafting this set looks awesome. So it's been fun. It's been great opening this box with you guys, and we'll see you next time. All right.